want to welcome everyone here today from Medfield Green, the president of Medfield Green. My name is Michele Stahl, and this is Lesley Shore, and this is her lovely center here that she's donated for this program, and we thank her for that. And we're so excited today to have Patricia Burke here, and she is an expert on EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, or fields.
I'm not an expert, but...
And so we want to thank her for being here today, and she can tell you a little bit more about her background and experience. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody here for coming, because without people interested in the subject, we're not going to be able to make the changes that need to happen. So I'm going to remind people to turn off your cell phones, please. And I'm going to try to do that by bringing mine and turning mine off.
Not just turn them down, but turn them off.
Right. You can turn them on later if you want to do some testing of cell phones.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I too want to thank you all for being here. I started initiating this conversation back in August because I was actually living in Medfield at the time. And I started not feeling well, and I could tell that something had changed in the environment. And another person who's very sensitive to frequencies came to visit the house that I was at, and he was also perceiving what I was feeling. And I also heard that one of the churches in town, I won't name them directly, but that they are intending to put in another cell phone tower. It may have already happened by now, I'm not sure. But I decided to sort of see if there was a green group around or somebody that I could talk to about RF and radio frequencies. And the reason why I'm in this conversation now is because I moved to California in 2008, and I was one of the people who got very sick there when the new infrastructure started to go up for the utilities. I'm going to move this a little further away from me. Can you still hear? Okay. So very, very sick. And this happens with a number of people. As soon as the meter goes on their house, their health just crashes. So I came to see Lesley kind of in a state of existential terror, I would say. And I'm so grateful that we didn't get together back in August, because so much has happened between August and now. And one of the most significant things is that there's a group of people across the state of Massachusetts now. There's actually two organizations, but one is HALT, MASmartmeters.org, and Claire and Theo are both here with me, and Theo's going to be giving part of the presentation today. And Theo is local, so he's a very good contact for you if you want to continue to work on this issue. I'm from Gloucester, and I hardly travel anymore because of my health, but I really wanted to come here and be with this community today. So I stayed in Medfield for the summer, and you know, I knew when I moved in that there was a water tower at the end of the street that had some stuff on it. I knew there was the Tetra network from the police, but there was this other thing that was coming through the house, and it was quite distinct where it reached sort of a threshold for me. And I was taking care of a cat who was very sick, and I know some of you know Kim Summers, and I wrote an article about the cat because I realized that the cat also was having problems with EMF, and I was tracking the cat's symptoms. And in the article I wrote that the cat probably would not survive till the Chinese New Year, which she didn't, those of you who know Kim in Asia. So I wanted to send a little prayer to the spirit of this little cat, but I feel that she was part of this effort today. So electromagnetic hypersensitivity, which is the condition that I have, is recognized as a functional disability in Sweden. And what that means is that I was not born disabled, but that the environment is causing a physical problem. So in Sweden, they have established white zones for people to move to and EMF rest houses, because they realize that there is something happening between the human energy field and all of the frequencies that we're putting into the airways. And on the handout that I gave you, the one with the quote on the top where it has references for RF radiation health concerns, I'll go through some of these other resources for you. But the third interview down, which says the biological effects of electromagnetic radiation on human health, with Dr. Camilla Rice, once you get through all the gratitudes, because hers were a lot longer than Leslie's and Michelle's, but once you get into the talk, she gives an overview of what was happening as of 2011. And most of the European countries have created white zones now for people who have become sick due to this configuration of human health and the new telecommunications frequencies that we're using. So, and the other thing that she offers in there, which I listed, is called a Bragg test. And a Bragg test for a school is where you do a comprehensive measurement of how much radiation the children are receiving in your school. Other countries are removing Wi-Fi from the school systems. The United States is still not on board in terms of the health issues. Bragg test stands for black, red, amber, green. And when you start to look at some of the health issues in the schools and the radiation levels, it's very interesting dynamic. So that's one thing, that I would recommend. And I don't even know if it costs anything, but she explains on there how to do it, and she offers resources to help. So, one of the questions is, are these frequencies affecting the human energy field? But this is a picture Shirley's going to hold up of the electromagnetic spectrum, the whole electromagnetic spectrum, and that's sort of what we're talking about right now. So this whole electromagnetic spectrum, at the low end is electromagnetic fields, at the high end is electromagnetic radiation. Can I pull it back a little bit? Sure. And there's a bunch of different levels on here: very low, low, medium, high, very high, ultra high. But this is basically the radio wave is right here, and the microwave frequency is right here. And most of our wireless technologies are in between those two frequencies. Now, if we were to lay this out, if we were to lay this out, this whole frame over the United States, the amount that we could see would be the length of the arm.
What's at the very top, Patricia?
Gamma rays.
Gamma rays, yeah. Gamma rays.
The deadliest.
Yes, yes, yes. So if we were to lay this out over the United States, all we could see would be the length of our arms, which is the visible spectrum, which is right here. The rest of it we can't see. And the United States is still pretty much philosophically saying that there is no interaction between all of these frequencies and the human energy field. And Theo might be able to clarify this a little bit more, but the health standards that we put in place for radio waves, back when we had radio waves, pretty much are still being used for microwaves. And they're not the same thing. We have not adjusted them. So there's a measurement for, and I think we can just set this down here, in the wavelength for wireless technologies, which is about the 900 megahertz range. So, yes. There's a thing called the power density. And the power density is sort of how much fog we have over us. So in India last week, there was an article in a paper that they had just, and you can sit, I'm done with posters for a minute. There was an article that they had just issued over 120, fines for cell phone towers that were beyond their power density frequency. And what happened in India is they don't have the kind of infrastructure that we have here, and they don't have the same kind of diseases that we have here. They're still dying of infectious diseases and more poverty. We're dying of diseases of civilization. But what happened was when the cell phone towers came in, people saw that people were dying under the cell phone towers. And so the population there was so concerned that they forced the government, it happened from the people, to lower the power density. I believe it was 10, do you know, Theo? Yeah. It was about 10, and they lowered it to 1. And the power density in the United States is 580. Oh. So when we look at a study like the World Health Organization, and they're going to decide whether or not cell phones cause cancer, they made a cautionary statement last year on May 31st, I believe, in Lyons, France. It fell on a holiday weekend here. Hardly anyone noticed it. But they said that non-ionizing radiation was a possible human carcinogen. And many other countries have already started to look at ways to mitigate the exposure. And the United States is stimulating the economy. And there's a lot of discussion right now about a new chairman for the FCC, and the question is about him opening up more spectrum to stimulate the economy. So if we step back a little bit, part of the problem why we're in this position is because in 1996 we had a regulation called the Telecommunications Act of 1996, and the idea, there's a lot of different agendas in it. It was sponsored by John McCain, there were military initiatives, but the big part of it was to get the whole United States hooked up with wireless communication, to get all the cell phone towers up. And in order to get it done quickly, they didn't want a community like Medfield to say, we don't want a cell phone tower in our town. So it was basically a preemptive strike, and Section 704 of the law states that no community can block the installation of telecommunications, I have that right, for health or environmental reasons. And that is why we have cell phone towers all over the country in places where people have attempted to hold them back in lawsuits and things like this. So it's a really rich time right now for the United States to go back and look at ways to address what happened. And as we continue to deploy new wireless technologies, especially the smart meter grid, which Theo's going to talk a little bit about, I think it's time to sort of go back and say that we need to be measuring the health impacts and the environmental impacts. So Shirley's going to take the little meter around. I think some of you heard it at the beginning. This is a professional grade RF meter from Germany that's used for building biology. Another area where building biology is really excelling is they set a limit for magnetic fields inside the home, and that's a concern when you keep making bigger power lines and you don't have them set further back from the houses. And there's a bill right now in the state of Maine. They're trying to get the power lines pushed back 300 feet. And of course the utility companies don't want to do that. But it's really not about 300 feet. It's about individual environments evaluating how it's affecting their particular ecology. Does that sort of make sense? So you could have it 300-foot setback, and if it's bouncing off of water, it might be different. It's really about aligning with the new biological sciences that have come out. So we'll see what we find in Lesley's beautiful space here.
Have somebody turn on their cell phone?
No, not yet. So we'll just see what we have here for RF. And so this is what they do in Germany. They have a new field called building biology. It's basically for health. And even though they're bringing down the radiation in the environment, they're trying to figure out how to shield, which is another way to go about it. So pointed out that way, Shirley, over the water. I found it over there before.
Oh, okay.
And you can make like a little circle. We have to find it when it's transmitting, and it could be being quiet.
And I'd like to point out that we don't have Wi-Fi in this building, and there are no computers in this building. So this building in some ways is atypical of your standard home, and we're also set back. So what we're going to find here is probably much less, I would think. That's actually why we're having the workshop here.
That's right. I came to Lesley because I couldn't find any buildings that didn't have Wi-Fi or cell phone towers. So we didn't find it this time. Some people heard it in the beginning. We definitely found something transmitting.
Well, if we turn on a cell phone, it's going to
Yeah, we'll go ahead because
Scarily
the topic's
busy.
already come up. So,
You want her to turn it on?
yeah, I guess so. Lesley's here. Yeah, hold it over while she's turning it on. So let's see if
I had this experience once, and I have never forgotten it because it was so dramatic.
is it reading? Let's see which setting is on. Sometimes this has two different frequency ranges. Okay, I think we got it now.
Do you want me to walk around the room again? Or?
Can you make a call? Okay, go ahead and make a call.
It's not on yet.
Okay,
It's
still
searching.
booting up.
Keep it. Okay.
Once it starts booting up, it picks it up.
Yeah, I'm still playing with this. I only really use this to
There you go.
hear what I can't see.
Okay, it's now working. And we might even put it on airplane mode and different modes, because sometimes you might want to leave your phone on. But anyway, so I'll make a phone call. I'll call my house. If I can leave. also just for experiment, since we've got this on, see what difference it makes to have it on airplane mode.
Good idea, I wondered that myself.
This is a microwave range.
Now it's down to 1, 2, 3.
It's in between. Am I right about that? Radio waves and microwaves, the cell phones are sort of right, and you
Yeah.
switched it to airborne.
It's on airplane mode.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
spectrum
Got it
goes
as high as
from
800.
3,000 to 300 million, 300,
I'll turn it off again.
gig. And this ends up being in the mega, in the mega, 900.
900 megahertz.
But
yeah.
there are some, they use a number of different ones, so there's no overlapping frequencies, so
Mm-hmm.
they can be, compounded within that area. But yeah, it's within the same, that range.
Yeah. There's the handout that I gave you here is, it's called RF Effects at Low Intensity Exposure Similar to Cell Towers and Wireless Smart Meters. And this is what the science is saying about the frequency ranges. These are the different tests that have been actually peer-reviewed and published by independent science, which is very different from what's being published when it's not independent. And there are a number of different health issues, but I think one of the ones that's very concerning to me is the name Marinelli, and he talks about RF at 900 megahertz for 2 to 12 hours cause DNA breaks in leukemia cells. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. There's a woman online, and she's on the handout also, Dr. Magda Havis, and she has done sort of the definitive test for electromagnetic sensitivity, which is that she used a cordless phone, which is also, for people who have this condition, very difficult, and showed just definitely that there was heart provocation, that it caused a change in the person's heart. And so I think for me, as a person who's been affected by these issues, as I'm going around and speaking to people, the World Health Organization, International Agency for Research on Cancer, is not going to comment until 2015 about whether or not cell phones cause brain tumors. And they're asking, based on epidemiology studies, how many people died. And they're not going to comment on children until 2020. And if this was a game of Russian roulette, America has a loaded gun, because we are not monitoring for a cautionary stance. So what happened with the wireless frequencies when they came into being commoditized is the nations kind of went with 3 different approaches, and kind of the middle was the Soviet bloc and the Russian, former Soviet bloc, the Russian countries, and they had been working with radiation for a long time. They were using it with their athletes because they found that if they could stimulate them with magnetic fields, they had better performance. It couldn't be detected through drug tests. They were also using it as a form of warfare. And during the Cold War, and Lesley may remember this, a little before my time, but America didn't really believe that Russia had these weapons, and so Russia proved it to them by irradiating the American embassy in Moscow. And the quote-unquote experiment took place. Do you know about this?
Yeah.
Took place, American embassy, when you work there, or embassy, it's either a 2 or a 4-year post. And what 2 ambassadors died in a row. The 3rd one had to be repatriated and died from leukemia. The children had leukemia, and the women had breast cancer. And that was when microwave warfare really came to the surface, and we started learning about its uses. And many people are working with the spectrum as a healing modality. It has tremendous benefits, and we're using it already definitively to stimulate bone growth, but we seem to be insisting that these other effects are not taking place. And I think just, one of the messages I would leave you overall is really to look beyond, sort of cast a very wide net in terms of thinking about the different decisions that have been made and whether, local communities can start to modify it a little bit. So I want to show you one of the things that's come up pretty clearly right now in terms, and this is just, I think, very early stage in terms of learning what's going on, but when we go to sleep at night, does anyone know what no, that's okay. Thank you. What has to rise at night when you're resting? The neurotransmitter melatonin. So when we go to bed at night, oh no, that's okay, not yet. It's the wrong picture, you're so cute. Okay, so melatonin, when you go to bed at night, it starts to rise at 10 o'clock. It should go up. Don't distract them yet. It should go up. Melatonin should go up. And I don't know if everyone's familiar with this. So your melatonin should go up. And then at sunrise, it should go down, and during the day, your melatonin level should be down. And your melatonin nurtures organs at night that are keyed in to be nurtured at night by melatonin. On the other side of that, when you go to bed at night, your cortisol level should drop, and it should stay down. And then as the sun rises, your cortisol level should wake you up, and then it should be up during the day, and then it should go down. Now you can do the picture. It's the other one, though. So, no, it's this
Okay,
one.
that's right.
This one. So, let's see. Can you still hear me, hon? So this isn't a great picture, but this is sunset, and while the sun is set, this is the melatonin, the green one, should go up. And then when the sun rises, it should go down. And this is the other way around. When the sun sets, your cortisol should go down. And during the day, it should be up. So at night, we have a very different configuration of our nervous system. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system. You still got it there? And so this basically, I'd ask you to sort of take in your mind right now, this is the picture of infinity. And if this cycle is working right for you, it's your turn to come do the poster. If this cycle is working right for you, you really have a basis of health and vitality. You know which one it is?
No.
And if
I don't.
no, and if your health is not functioning well, then if you're not going on those cycles, go ahead, you're going on some other kind of energy. That's the answer. And we have a great deal, it even looks like coffee spilled on it, it's so embarrassing. But we have a great many people now in the United States who are not in a normal rhythm on this cycle. And what happens for me, like somebody just asked me if I could feel the phone. I can't feel it right now because I'm so overcharged, because I drove down here and I have so much cortisol in my system right now, and it'll take at least 72 hours for me to recover from traveling, from the reaction that I had. And if we have a high portion of the culture that's not at a subtle level of awareness, they won't feel the increasing power density if they're already overcharged. But it seems to be the case so far that there are people who have not had any effects. And there is some debate about this. One of the best, I think, videos to watch after you watch Garrick, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, Smart Meters and EMR, the health crisis of our time. Dr. Klinghardt went into the homes of 10 women who had autistic children and 10 women who did not. And he found that he can predict whether a woman will eventually give birth to a child who will be diagnosed with autism by the electromagnetic field of the mother when she's sleeping. Because there is a level of vulnerability to altering all of these frequencies. And the faster that tissue is differentiating or growing, of course, the more it would change. So it hits the pregnant women first, it hits, I think, is it children next? Then women, and men are last. But if you have something going on in your energy system where you're not attuned to your subtle energy fields, then it's difficult to be able to notice when you're going out of balance because you weren't in balance to begin with. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Would that have something to do with feeling sleepy during the day?
A lot of people, sleepiness, I think, is one of the, is that on your chart too?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'll come back to you and let you talk about it a little bit. So I want to show you something, and then I'm going to do a little bit of an experiential exercise. And I have to apologize, I don't have a clock, so I have no idea what time it is. I'm going to have to put a watch up here or something.
And it's not one of those battery run ones. I don't like batteries on my
Okay, great. So, Theo, let me have you hold this up again for me. So this picture is a very rudimentary thing, which just says in the morning, you know, during daytime one thing is happening, I have it backwards, during nighttime one thing is happening, and during daytime one thing is happening. And I want to say too, breast cancer has definitely been associated, there is no question, with insufficient melatonin levels. There's no question that they're happening either at the same time or causal, but you know, it's a measurement, a litmus test for breast cancer. So this is just day and night, but we don't have just day and night. We have the sun, sort of sunset, we have the day going into night, then we have sunrise, then we have the sun overhead, and then we have the sun setting again. So what the ancient cultures did was they really watched and noticed what happened both with animal life and with themselves. This is yours, sure. You hold it both up too. And they noticed specific things happening in the human body at different times of day. And I know a lot of you do yoga as well, but this is, it's on one of your flyers too. This is the meridian flow wheel, and it shows the different poses that go along with these particular energy pathways, because what they were doing was figuring out how to catch the energy that was coming in from the sun and to use it to alchemize with it more skillfully. So they realized that there was this sort of flow of energy going through the body, nurturing different organs at different times. And we don't have an awareness of this in this culture very much, or not yet, but we're getting there. So the reason why this is important is because what they noticed, for example, is when the sun was right overhead, it was the high tide of heart, it's the high tide of the digestive chi in the body. And they knew all the neurotransmitters and how they interacted, and not just this. So, and you can put that down now because you're getting tired. so how are you doing?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine.
So they knew about all of these. So when we all came here today, we agreed that it was 2 o'clock. And actually, you can sit on the chair too. And if we had Skyped someone in from Provincetown and somebody from Rochester, New York, everybody would have gotten on the phone at 2 o'clock. But first of all, it's not 2 o'clock because this is daylight savings time. It was actually 1 o'clock. So we were in a completely different place on the flow wheel. But what was happening with the sun in Provincetown is not what's happening in the sun in Rochester. They're very different when you get to the subtle energy body. So, for example, if I go out to the bus stop and bring in my recycling bin at 2 o'clock, it's filled with ants. But if I go out in the morning and bring it in, there are no ants in it, because they realized that different things were happening at certain times during the day, and Lesley's probably even noticed some of them here on the farm, because the animals are following the angles of the sun's rays, and so is our energy. But more importantly, what they realized is if something happens here, like at 3 to 5 p.m. with the lungs, it's going to affect the large intestine between 5 and 7. They realized that these were interrelated, and they also realized that if something happened in the middle of the night, it would affect the heart. So if we have someone who thinks that it's okay to read how much water your house is using by sending a radio transmission at the 400 megahertz, which is, they're using a different frequency for that, because they want to do it when no one's using the water and no one is looking at the biological effects, some people are going to be adversely affected. And Dr. Klinghart's theory is that electromagnetic hypersensitivity, like I have, is a fallacy, and that it reaches a perfect storm for everybody. And when I moved to California, the EMF battle is really very fired up there right now in terms of the smart meters. It's really horrible what's been going on there. And I saw the testimony, and you can go home and watch it too, where people were asking, begging the DPU to give them permission not to have one of these meters on their house. And it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. No American should have to be begging for their health. And the issue was that people were already sick before they even had the meter. They had already reached the inflection points. So these are people who are turning their power off at night, and who, like I lived out in the tent the last 4 months I was in California. After trying to turn the power off, you could not get away from the juxtaposition of frequencies. And so when I came back here, I really wanted to try to speak to people about what I had seen, and you're the first group that's come to hear me. So thank you so much.
You tell people what a smart meter is.
Actually, Theo's going to talk about the smart meter. I'm going to lead one experiential exercise, and then Theo's going to talk about that. So I'm going to have you actually stand up if you can for a second, and feel free to take a stretch and take some clothes off if you want. Actually, if I'm going to have you go over there. Oh, And I'm going to just have you imagine that we are a school of fish, okay? And something is going to happen to Theo, and he's going to turn so that the whole school of fish has to move. And you can go ahead and look at him, but which way are you going to turn the fish? Get away. So everyone's going to turn. Okay. And now turn back to me again and make everyone turn again. Okay, great. Now, how do the fish, know what the fish on the outside of the school is saying, even if there's no, the school's divided here. Okay, so you can sit down for a second while I explain this piece. So we have some energy pathways on our body that are the yang defenses, and they're part of the meridian flow wheel. And the one on your front side of your body decides if you're going to move forward and back, the front and the back. But the side to side tells us which direction we're going to go. And that is the most vigilant one for protecting your electromagnetic health. So I'm going to show you a picture of it, we're going to trace it, and then we're going to have an experience of what it feels like. And there we go. I'm not doing very good staying seated at the microphone. Are we still doing all right? Okay, so is this the right? So we have in our energy pathway, and this is the one at midnight, a very long pathway that runs basically from the head, down the body, down the length of the legs. And it goes, can you guys see it okay? It goes from here. So you know when people first started to pierce their eyes right here and you just looked at them and went, ugh. It's because your energy field knew that that is not a good practice to put metal at the end of a meridian system. Even if you don't know anything about the electromagnetic body, your energy field knows it's not a good practice. So it goes down, it comes up, it goes down, it comes up, it goes down, it comes up. Why does it do this? It does this because when it detects a threat to your brain, it closes the plates to your skull. And it's a very ingenious response from nature to be able to protect the most important electromagnetic field, the two, the brain and the heart. So this is just one meridian, which goes down the length of the body, down the outside of the legs here. And it happens to be the gallbladder. Are we having a little problem in the United States with gallbladders right now? Because the last generation had their tonsils taken out mistakenly during the age of infectious diseases, and what we did was we created all these superbugs, and now we have people taking their gallbladders out, and these are people who don't have strong gallbladder energy. That's why they're just crashing. But I'm going to just show you what we'll get up and do is just sort of trace it lightly, and then we're going to see what EMF feels like. This is a combination of a couple meridians together, but this is why the field goes, one of the reasons why it crosses over the skull. Okay, so I'm going to stand up again. Thanks, you can set it down. Oh, okay. No, actually, why don't you, can everybody see? Okay.
I trace my gallbladder every day.
I know, we need a back and a front, so why don't you stay with me and let Theo hold it.
Okay.
So we've never practiced before, we've never presented before. Okay, so first this is just a short, dirty one. So if you can just put your hands on the side of your head, and one of the ways to sort of check in too at any point in time is sort of with the pulse right here on the side. But I'm just going to sort of have you go up over your head, the broad hand, down, and you'll feel right here at the base of your neck, there's a pretty, like base of your skull, sort of some pretty active points right there. And then come down and let your hands come onto your ribs. Go forward on your ribs a little bit, back on your waist, down the sides of your legs, and off the second to the last toe. You can shake your hands off a little bit there. Okay, great. All right, so now I'm going to try to lead you through a little bit more detail of it. I have to cheat a little bit. So your hands, this picture isn't exactly perfect, but your fingers, there's one meridian ends here and another one starts, but your fingers just rest at the edge of your eyebrows. Then go down to the bottom of the opening of the ear, and then sort of go up on the side of your head, just past the plate of the skull, down over your ear, up sort of towards the back of your head. Shirley, can you turn around?
Yeah.
Then you're going to go down to these little points on your head, on your base of your skull. Then you come up, and there's 2 points on the forehead right here, and these are major stress release points. When someone goes like this, they're trying to calm that energy down. So you're holding right here. Then we're going to go over the head again, down the neck, it's a little hard to trace right here, but then you're sort of right next to the bra. Never put your cell phone there, ever, ever, ever. Then you go forward on the ribs, back on the waist, down the hips, and off the little toe. So,
I know some women who put their cell phones in their bra.
not a good idea. Okay, so the reason why I know this is because I was struck by lightning. I've been both struck by lightning and electrocuted by a smart meter, so I know the difference between the two. And this is the lightning strike response. So put one hand on your head and clamp your head as hard as you can, and make a fist out of your other hand and put it in front of your heart. And this is what happens when a person starts to have a reaction to EMF. The skull starts tightening up, and the pericardium tightens to protect the heart. So I just want you to take a moment, you can have your eyes open or closed, and think about all these kids who've been diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, ADD, autism. The list goes on and on and on. So as you're holding that, you can gradually begin to release your hands a little bit. Oops, Claire's going to give it, thank you, Claire. And shake your hands out a little bit. So this is just one of the 12 meridian pathways. But this, I think, is one of the, you could take any of the meridians and follow it and find a connection with the EMF. But this is explaining the head fog, the memory loss, the headaches, all those things that are happening. So you can have a seat. Got one more for you there, Shirley. So we have a wonderful response for this issue, which is that you could get a Botox shot to your head if you have migraine headaches for 15 days, because this is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to suppress the symptom instead of figure out what's happening to all the people that are having adverse effects. Has anyone seen this ad? So this is a new use for Botox. Chronic migraine squeeze, having 15 or more headache days a month. Each headache lasting 4 hours or more. So we don't know what time it is, and we don't really have a high fluency in terms of the electromagnetic fields and how they affect the human energy field. Our knowledge is really sort of embryonic at this point as a mass culture, and it's been lost in a lot of the other cultures too. And then we also have a lack of regulation, and that's sort of a bit of a perfect storm. So for me, when I feel a cell phone, if I'm not already completely overcharged from some other, because I tend to react to a lot of things, the cell phone reaction for me is the tightening of the skull and the tightening. This leads to an enlarged heart, cardiovascular problems. The brain, when it gets dehydrated, it's not happy. I get an instant sense of thirst. And I had a pre-existing factor because I was struck by lightning. I'm one of the people who's in one of those categories. And if the United States doesn't provide white zones for people like me to live, and they keep on continuing to deploy the technology, it's hard for me to conclude, what the plan is here. So, yes, you had a question?
I didn't really understand the purpose of the exercise we did. I didn't understand what you were explaining.
Oh, this is the reaction. This is the EMF
All
reaction.
the other things we were doing and shaking, I mean, I don't get it. Well,
She
Okay, I'm sorry.
the connection
Yes,
between the
okay.
meridian system and
Yes, I'm sorry, I might have jumped into that too far. So what they understood is that each of these time slots, there was a time of day. Like right now, what time is it? Are we in the 3 to 5 time slot?
Almost
3 to 5, at 3 o'clock, although we don't really know what time it is with the sky, but at 3 o'clock the bladder meridian will come into dominance. And there's an underground river in the human energy field that is emphasized in a particular organ for 2 hours periods of the day. And there's a line of energy that goes along with it. And we traced the line, and then we saw what happens when the line tightens up. And that tighten up reaction is a protection for the human energy field, where the bioenergy is saying something's coming in that's dangerous, and that's the defense it uses. So let me go back. I should say something else about this. So when we go into the fight or flight response, the body reorganizes itself so that it can defend against some outside predator. And one of the ways that it does it is it puts a lot of energy into the muscles so that we can either run away or have power to hit someone or fight. But the other thing it does is it tightens up your tendons. So if I was going to have to run away from somebody on a rocky beach, it would be really good if I didn't sprain my ankle. It tightens up my ligaments and tendons. That pathway, this is the pathway that happens by. I don't know where the poster went. Oh, it's right there, Theo. It's on the other side there. So this is actually the energy pathway that the ancients recognized tightens up to protect the body using just one meridian, just the gallbladder energy, to protect the body against something else external. This was developed for something found in nature, like a lightning strike. So your body would tighten up. Now, last year I was living with 2 dogs. One dog, totally oblivious, firecracker out in the driveway. The other dog, 12 hours before a storm, that dog wanted to hit the highlands because that dog had this reaction. He could detect EMF frequencies changing in the environment at a higher level of sensitivity. The other dog is clueless. And right now, basically we're saying that, no humans are having this reaction. I mean, Western medicine is really denying that this is even happening. And when other countries are having a different opinion, it's not a universal truth, basically. So this is actually part of the body's electrical defense system. And it tightens the brain, but it also tightens all the ligaments. And then afterwards, you should relax and let go. And what happens is if you just keep getting overstimulated and you can't relax and let go, you're simultaneously overcharged and exhausted. So, thank you. I'm sorry.
Did you follow that, Robin?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, because it is the acupuncture system.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Are you oversensitive because you were struck by lightning? Did your oversensitivity become apparent after you were struck?
It didn't become apparent until about 2005. And that was when I had a cell phone tower near my house. So, and there's debate in terms of whether people can recover, how far it can go. I have organ damage now, there's no question. I have nerve damage. I've been in an inflammatory response for so long, even though I've moved 16 times in 4 years. There are other people in the United States. There's a radio-free zone in West Virginia, and people have been fleeing there from their homes because they get this reaction. But I would say we don't know really there are certain cofactors that make people more susceptible, and some people certainly are more sensitive than others. And I think the dog analogy is one of the most helpful ones for me. They're all dogs, but they don't all have the same sensitivity. Some dogs smell particularly well. We use them as bloodhounds to sniff out drugs. So, yeah.
I have learned that I'm extremely sensitive. Couple of incidents at a very high-tech hospital in Boston. Happened twice.
And did
I
you
don't have to, I can spell it out if you want, but I mean, the point is it was very, very clear
to you?
that there was a strong reaction.
Yeah. Well, Toronto, I think, is the first city that has opened an EMF-free hospital, because I couldn't even go to a hospital if I was really sick. I broke my foot this year and I couldn't go. I wouldn't have survived. I was so damaged after I hurt myself. I had to wait until I was healthy enough to go, and then I had to recover, from going. And this is, it really is a sort of a cascading and intensifying dynamic, I think. So, but I want to make sure we cover the smart meters.
I'd like to add one concept here, and that is the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
And people like Patricia are ultra sensitive, and they're kind of warning, in my mind, the rest of us what's going on. Because Patricia's more sensitive, she's able to say to us, that doesn't mean you are not getting affected. She feels the consequences. She's developed symptoms because she is more sensitive. But we have a very similar system. We may not be as sensitive, we may not have developed symptoms, but that does not mean that we're not being affected at some level.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I hope that's helpful in terms
Thank
of
you,
saying
yeah.
the connection as to why you're
Yes.
such a champion and able to share this information, because it really is a warning to us who are not as sensitive.
Yeah, someone was just mentioning cows, and that's another thing, is just watching the animal life and seeing how they're being affected. And I think that, the studies on the honeybees have been very troubling. And again, when there's a number of cofactors like pesticides and things, it's hard to isolate out. But to keep on driving forward with the EMF becomes a concern. Really, I think, my recommendation would just be in line with cautionary stance that other countries have adopted, because we can still have the technologies without so much experimentation. But I want to make sure Theo gets to the smart meters, and then maybe I can come back and do some more questions, if that's okay. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer more questions at the end of the meeting.
I'm actually going to grab a seat if you don't mind. My name's Theo Datry. I actually live just across the river, on the river in Millis, so I'm on the other side of the Charles River. I have really a conventional engineering scientific background, so I'm just going to preface a couple of things. And I know Patricia, between her knowledge and experience, could probably speak till sunset, and I could probably speak till sunrise, but I'm going to try to make it real brief. In designs, for example, for engineering, products are designed to protect other components within a design, and they do things to protect from interference. It's EMI, electromechanical interference, or electromagnetic interference, I should say, in this particular case, or RFI, radio frequency interference. So we know that RF and radio waves have an effect. They have an effect on engineering designs and on components. So what we do is we shield these as engineers, because we don't want another component to get affected that's within that circuit, another sensitive component. So it's been known in the scientific community that RF energy and electromagnetic energy cause disruptions within an electronic circuit. So we shield them. We actually we'll put metal barriers or metal shields on this. So to extrapolate, anything that travels in the radio frequency field has some effect on something else. And certainly the biological effects, we're not just a mechanical system. The human body is a neurochemical, electromagnetic, biological system. And it gets affected by not just chemicals, it gets affected by electromagnetic presence of either communication or anything in the inherent nature of the environment that you're in. One of the things, a quick analogy, just because I think it applies to what we're up against here, is that we have the history of the sun, for example. We've been aware for millennia that the sun it's the primary source of heat, primary source of energy in the solar system. Now it has thermal effects. It can cause you to be dehydrated, and it can cause you to have it can cause you in some thermal situations where you can dehydrate the body. But what we didn't really study until recently, a generation ago, is the electromagnetic effects, or the radiation. And the thermal effects of the sun really aren't that, we can find ways around those, but the radiation is the real issue. And of course, the largest organ on the body is the dermis, the skin. And the number one cause of cancer is radiation from the sun. And we've only acknowledged that recently. In fact, SPF has only come out in the mid-1960s, sun protection factor. Yet we've been exposed to that for millennia. And again, we didn't have any meters to test for that. You can't use any of your five senses, your common five senses, touch, taste, smell, feel, or hearing, but we know that that's a real energy.
Number one cause for what?
For skin cancer. The radiation from the sun is the number one cause of cancer.
Cancer.
For the skin. And the skin is the dermis is the largest organ in the human body. So I'm looking arrears a little bit of how we dealt with some of these other health issues, and how it's taken so long for us to really get to a place where we're actually trying to prevent, or we've actually acknowledged that radiation can cause issues. One other example before I go into the actual smart meters is that right around the end of World War II, there was a local company called Raytheon, which did a lot of research, and they were a primary contractor of mine for years. And a fellow who was working on sending radio waves, microwaves, back and forth for defense purposes, noticed that a candy bar in his shirt pocket melted when he sent a microwave from one point, a transmission point, to a reception point. And they continued to do that. Then he noticed he decided to intentionally experiment. So he put unpopped kernels of corn in his pocket, and they popped. Now, you don't need to have an advanced degree in science to understand there's obviously something going on there. There's energy being sent from one point to another, but it radiates outward. And if it has an effect on something organic like that, what's the effect on the human body? There's an organic effect, but then there's also an electromagnetic effect. And you've got to remember that your body is an electromagnetic, neurochemical, biological system. So we've known that since 1945. Now that they went on to produce the first commercial microwave oven, which came out in 1947, except it was 6 feet tall and 750 pounds, and nobody would buy it. 20 years later, it took 20 years. Now, this company was the world leader in that microwave development, but it took from 47 to 67 to get something that could be potentially used conventional. Now, that's a lot of development, but we understand just by the example that the accident that happened was that something organic and a non-living system, for example, a candy bar or a kernel of corn, was dramatically affected by that microwave because there was no shielding, there was no protecting, there was nothing in place of that. If you look at your microwave oven now, you'll notice that you'll have a glass door, but you'll see what looks to be a screen, and that's part of that shield. And to the point of Patricia's experience, there's an old saying that what's the safest place to be in an electrical storm, and people have said, well, your automobile, and I would give it 2 caveats. Don't be near a tree, because if the tree gets struck, it doesn't matter. But you can't be in any automobile. It has to be a hardtop, because if you're in a convertible, you don't have a cage over you, what's known as a Faraday cage. That is another way to protect from, again, a known, in that particular case, you're protecting from electrical current. But it is true, as long as you have rubber tires and you have a hardtop, doesn't work for a motorcycle or convertible. But that's another understanding of there needs to be shielding when there's electromagnetic radiation present for the human body. And then, of course, we get an entire spectrum effects. You know, on one particular case, you know, it's highly probable that it's a mortal experience in lightning strike. And so you're protecting from that. But if you take the electromagnetic spectrum and the RF energy in general, there's a whole spectrum of things that affect your body and its function and its health. And those are things that we need to keep in mind. And with respect to that, there's no free lunch. If you're transmitting radio waves, there is going to be an effect on the human body. So understanding that, Patricia mentioned that the Telecommunications Act, strangely enough, extracted or made a statement that said, we can't review this if there's a health issue or an environmental issue. Those are the only 2 things that won't stop us from the development of that. Now, that's only that's a United States edict. Europe's treating it a lot differently. Their regulations are different. Their threshold levels are different. They're funding research more fervently than we are to look at cancer, to look at how it affects development of children. And we've actually almost begun to suspend all that funding because right now there's a drive to just completely develop this smart grid here, which connects everything from individual homes to you have regional sites that may be collecting data and transmitting, and you may be going up to satellites as well. And the cumulative effect of that is, you're getting a lot of electromagnetic pollution, a lot of radiation pollution to the human element that is involved in it, as well as, quite frankly, plant and animal element as well. And that's the type of system they want to set up, and financially for the companies that are driving that, that's very attractive. But there's not been any testing. There's a whole host of studies, both from the U.S. and abroad, that have shown the detrimental effects. We spoke about some of them in terms of some of the studies brought up, and some of the handouts you're going to get. There's so much information out there right now. Now, of course, you do have some studies that are congruent to what you might have seen from the tobacco industry. There's about 50 or 60 years of studies from the tobacco industry that were funded by the tobacco industry that said cigarettes are harmless. Now, it took us about 60 years to get to a point to say, well, maybe there was something wrong with those studies. You're beginning to get some studies where you have conflicts of interest, and you have to look at who's the funding source that have essentially said that either they're inconclusive or we can't find anything at this point in time. And there's another caveat in there is some of the studies are for the thermal effects only of the radiation. And what we see is the non-thermal effects. And some of the non-thermal effects, and these have been studied from Columbia University doctors all the way over to Europe, the World Health Organization, is some of the non-thermal effects is changing of the calcium ions into biological processes, which have huge effects in everything from children to elders. Fragmentation of the DNA cells, changes in the blood and brain barrier in animals after exposure to the microwaves, cellular stress response for electromagnetically triggered heat shock proteins, and changes in the RNA synthesis of proteins. I mean, everything from your DNA to your current cell function. The typical general areas, and again, we can apply these, or a lot of people will apply these to other sources, not knowing that they're electromagnetically related. But if nervousness, headaches, difficulty sleeping, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, and heart palpitations, those are all directly related. And if any of those surface, and they haven't been prevalent, you might look at a new cell tower, or you might look at what we're looking at now is smart meters, or so-called smart meters. They're RF generators, and what they are is they're a source of generating radio frequency communications. The history of the power companies is that we've generally had these analog meters which have little hands that turn around on them, and you used to see a wheel mounted horizontally that you could see rotating. And what those things have been proved, they've been around for decades, actually beyond a half a century. They work perfectly, they were accurate, they had no ill effects. To try to save the company's money, instead of sending a meter reader around, they want to do that remotely. Now, there's also, and they can send that to a localized communication center. And what we have now is two sets of types of meters. One is an AMR meter, which I did an audit in Medfield, and they're out there already. And in fact, I think there are some AMI meters, or capable AMI. The difference between the two is AMR sort of was a one step away from the mechanical, and it was automated meter reader, AMR. That meant it had the capability of sending radio frequency out, and it can do it 24 hours a day. It generally does that. It will do it at different frequencies. In other words, it might send it out every 10 seconds, every 30 seconds, every 5 minutes, but it does it 24 hours a day, so it's sending out where that meter is at. The issue with that is, again, it's right mounted onto your house. It's not shielded, so you could have your bed next to that, and you're getting that 24 hours a day, just like the power company gets to bill you 24 hours a day, whether you're on vacation down south or up north. They're constantly generating revenue when you're away. But now they're also constantly generating an RF field. So that's the first step, and they're in both in the I've found them commercial and also on residences in town. And the second meter is a more sophisticated meter, and that's where they want to move to. That's an AMI, and that's an automated meter infrastructure, which goes to this plan here. And this plan has really two important changes to the way things have been done for the last century. The first change is that in addition to sending out an RF signal, it has the ability to receive an RF signal. So remotely, the power company can communicate with the meter on your house. Now, that allows them to do a number of things. They can reduce the amount of power at a particular time. They can also look and find out what components you're running and at what hours. And they can decide to reduce or change or control what you have in your house. The other thing that they can actually read is they can tell if you're deciding to run your dishwasher at this hour, but if you're deciding to run your power saw or your table saw or some other power equipment in your garage or whatever you want to do, they have visibility of what you're doing when you're doing, because there's this two-way communication. And essentially, that's they're a power company that's providing you with a product. Do they have the right to know how you use their product and at what time you use their product? That's a question of civil liberties, and are you surrendering that to them just because you're buying from them? The interesting thing that most of us have is we have a limited choice. We don't have 10 power companies that we can go to because we choose either a different price or we choose either how somebody provides that service. So the AMI meter, which they're now beginning to be deployed in town here, is a two-way communication meter. And so now you have RF coming to your house, and you have RF being generated from your house. So you have multiple fields. And you can see that from house to house to house, that creates a phenomenal amount of compounded radio frequency energy that's not being monitored, not being measured. And again, this is something that's being rolled out prior to really being properly tested for the health effects. And what we already know at the forefront is the health effects. We have issues, and it's not just people that are hypersensitive. Everybody along that spectrum is being affected one way or another, and you may not know because it may be a cumulative effect, and you may not know because it may take you 20 or 30 years before you develop something that's associated with that smart meter grid. This has sort of been done at night, quietly, without any pomp and circumstance or announcements. The companies have done that. I've had my barn and my house meters have been swapped and upgraded without any notification to me or without any pilot program around here. There are some places like the city of Worcester, which is doing a pilot program, which is getting visibility, so at least people can go and see, ask questions, go and retrieve, and there's copious amounts of data. There's medical data, there's scientific data, and it's continuing to come out so that you can make an informed decision as to whether or not you'd like to be on board with that. But as Patricia mentioned, the way that this was set up is that you don't get the town-to-town vote on that. So it's really taking people to collectively get together, and certain states have already done that, like California and Maine, and there are a number of other states that are on the move to educate people, because this again was just kind of rolled out without any, and probably in concert with the Telecommunications Act, which says you don't suspend the technology development for health or environmental reasons. They're not a legitimate reason. And so this has kind of been in concert with that. And that brings us to where we are right now. So we're in that area of new and early stage RF meters. There are some other, beside the potential loss of your privacy, and beside the electromagnetic health issues, you also have what's coming out to be reported as difficulties with the retrofitting of this on the old meters. They're having home fires, spontaneous fires, because the infrastructure is not set up correctly. The meters are spiking, and you're looking at literally hundreds and hundreds of home fires. And there's a few videos out there that show some of the results of the swapped out meters, and the power companies are not taking liability. They're claiming that it's, it's on the side of the house, not on the meter, but we didn't have those issues before. We've never had those issues. In fact, the mechanical meters have never been a source of that, but now that's gone up exponentially. And that's in the UK, that's in mainland Europe, and that's now also in the United States. So that's kind of the, really kind of the Reader's Digest version. As I said, I can go into a lot of details of the health issues, a lot of details of the science behind it, but I think it's pretty easy to understand where to point. We need to pay attention to that. It's like, for example, radon a generation ago no one cared about, but now we test for that before we buy a new home, because we know that radon, again, that's another form of radiation, and depending upon where your home is, it could be radiating 24 hours a day, and we know it causes health effects. There are ways to mitigate that. If you do have radon, there are ways to mitigate radon. Well, we know that we have an issue with the RF power generation, and that's something we really need to address. And this is one thing that's preventable, because we already know we have a technology. The analog meters work perfectly well. They've passed muster for almost a century. And right now it looks like, unless we decide as the customers that we would like to at least slow down the implementation of these meters, we'll just continue to do that and then have to look at that over our shoulders as to how do we address the health effects after the fact. And we've already done that. We've got a history of that with the tobacco industry and so forth, where we didn't take any proactive action. And I just leave one quick analogy before we want to go into questions, so I know we want to close out. Since it's baseball season, I'm going to use a baseball analogy. The power companies are looking at trying to frame this really quickly as a cost savings for everybody. Well, you're going to find out that it's actually going to cost you more money. It's in the tens of billions of dollars to roll this out. Now, they're not going to show the price differences now, but later on they'll pick that up. And they'll pick it up through tariffs or through direct sources. The way they're playing this is that they're going to save you money. And to go back to my baseball analogies and say, listen, we're all the season ticket holders. We pay the owners of the power companies, because whether they be the stockholders or the officers. We also pay the baseball players. Those are all the employees of the power. You don't get to do anything without our checks. We pay you every month, and you charge us 24 hours a day. So we really ought to have some say in how things get run. They came to us with a proposal. We're going to take your season ticket from $100 to $95 a game. Okay, you're going to save us $5 a game. We decided to go along with this. And then when we go to the opening day, we notice how they're saving the $5. They take every one of our seats and they cut it in half, and now you got to share it with somebody else. Well, there's only a problem that only 10% of us can go to that. That's all our children that can fit in that seat. The other 90% of us have to stand up for the whole game. So you saved us $5. Then we also notice you're charging the other person $95. So you saved us $5 and you picked up $90 yourself. But the main thing is you affected our quality of life. The quality of life, the quality of the product you have, is not the same as it was 10 years ago before we had this RF that's now in our house 24 hours a day. And that's what they're really trying to do. But we're the season ticket holders. And being the season ticket holders, do you want to save $5 and give up half of your seat? And you want to do a 7th inning stretch for 9 innings and stand up for 3.5 hours for the game? That's the quality of your life. I don't think we want to do that. And again, it's up to us, being in that position, to voice our concerns that we want the quality product we had back then, back prior to this. And that's something we're going to have to do by our voices and by letting them know. And that's hopefully why part of some of you folks are here, to find out the details of where we are and where we might need to go to, if we're really concerned about the community and our personal and family's health.
Yeah, I don't know if I made this clear in the beginning, but Vermont and Maine already have opt-out versions, and so we have a version in Massachusetts in the House right now where people can opt out of having a smart meter on their home. It still doesn't help someone like me, though. It will slow this down a little bit, but unless they're going to provide, a place for people to live who have adverse health effects, and that's what some other countries are doing. But the main thing is, just to sort of let people know what's happening. And Claire, I want to thank Claire. She did a lot of work on the flyers and things because I can't use a computer. And she was going to speak for a minute. Did you want to speak? You were going to speak.
Can I just have 2 minutes?
Yeah.
So, and I also would like to have a little discussion on what we can personally do in our lifestyle.
I'm going to cover that.
Okay, great.
So, Patricia and I have discussed this. She's sweet.
Are there more of those? We didn't get them back.
You know what? I have more in the car. I didn't anticipate doing this. But Patricia's sweet. Theo's brilliant. I'm mad. These people, this is $1 billion. This is $1 billion of our money to implement this. $1 billion in Massachusetts. It's a $30 billion national program of our money so that we can make people sick and we can tax ourselves into not using electricity. This is a stealth, terrible, terrible program. Other states, 32 other states are fighting this. We have the advantage of timing where we can stand on the shoulders of these people and their fights because they got into this too late to stop it. We need to stop it before that $1 billion is spent, and it's too late because people like Patricia are going to have nowhere to go. I personally do not feel, the effects, but from the thousands of websites I've been on, I know it's happening to me. And one of these meters will go on my grandchildren's wall again over my dead body. This is the beginning. This is a line of demarcation with these meters. Right up till now, we have choice in our home. You can use they're looking at us in our transponders, on our phone, but in our home is our castle. And this is them looking through the keyhole into what we're doing, when we're doing it, when we're not home, and what are they going to do, what type of dishwasher you're using, how old is your refrigerator. That's none of their business. And those are only parts of it. If you look at this, and I have them for more, the security is a huge issue with these. The ex-director of the CIA said it's a stupid grid. MIT said these meters make the electrical grid actually more susceptible to hacking, and they call it cyber attacks, but he's talking about terrorism. This is big money trying to control what we do and when we do it, regardless of the health effects. So I try to be sweet. I'm definitely not brilliant. But if this makes you mad, you come join Halt Smart Meters and you help us. We're a fledgling right now. We need feet on the ground. We need you to talk to your neighbors. The learning curve, as you've seen, is big. This is not a soundbite issue. We need help. And this is for yourself, this is for your grandchildren, and, for the elders. The elderly are at great risk.
Yeah.
This is this is Australia. Canada is in a huge fight. huge fight.
I was gonna say, yeah, I'm from Canada, so whenever I go home to visit, like my mom, everybody's got those on their house now.
Yeah, British Columbia, there's a
And
huge
they
fight.
charge a different rate. Like, who's
Oh.
gonna do their laundry in the middle of the night? Everybody's sleeping.
So
But
just,
that's the only time that you
Right.
have the cheaper rate.
right,
During the day,
in the
it's
pilot
like
program in
sky
Fitchburg, the Massachusetts pilot program, on the 5 hottest summer days in 2011, they charged 13.6 times the base rate for electricity. And from noon to 6, it was 2.4, 2.6, I forget that number. But that, right, they don't want to build any more power plants, which is, you know, a reasonable goal. But it's not just air conditioning that they're charging you 13.5 times to use. It's your coffee maker, it's your refrigerator. This is big money doing the talking, and we are the thems, we are the serfs. Well, I am not a serf, I'm an American. This is the freest, most prosperous country in the world, and they are treating us like sheep. So, that's my thing.
That prosperity is not ours, it's the corporations that control everything. I mean, the corporations own just about everything. How can small groups of people be, you know,
I think we're reaching a point of critical mass, though.
Yeah,
It's about.
I never
small
heard
groups.
of these, I mean, I've been aware of all of the information on much of it, but I haven't been aware of places like this where we could come and hear more and talk about it.
Well, we're doing these, this was our first talk, and we appreciate it.
So it's
We're
just
doing these all
growing.
across the state. And
You need
you
a
Google-
groundswell.
right, and
It's
that's,
coming.
well, this is our first step.
But Worcester's demonstration project is starting in June, and we would really like to stop the demonstration project in Massachusetts, because if one state could do that, it would be quite phenomenal. And Massachusetts has a town meeting format, so, you know, we have a different way of mobilizing than some of the other states do. And I think the idea of asking for current technological deployments to be aligned with current safety standards is an even broader issue that could bring us into alignment with some of the other things too. You know, and Earth Day's coming, and our day's coming.
So how, for example, how to bring this up at the next town meeting, which in most towns is soon?
I would suggest you call your mayor, you call your rep, you call your senator, and you say, this meter is not going on my house. I'm the Attorney General, I sent her an email, I called, they sent me, thank you very much. Thank you for letting us know. I called, very angry. This is a huge deal. I say, call everyone you know, talk to everyone you know. It's a big learning curve, and this sheet is on our helpmeters.com. There's 30 citations. This is all source citations. Every fact on here is true. And the National Grid and the DPU are, I don't want to use cahoots, are a force in among themselves to impose this on us. And this is a line of demarcation, because this is our home, and this has not happened before. So call everybody you know and talk to everybody you know, especially your representatives in your town, in your county, in your state.
In Vermont, they also called their own emergency town meetings just about this topic. That was one strategy, just to try to get the word out to more people.
But Vermont got in it too late.
What do you mean they got into it too late? If they'd already
They got in after this $1 billion. Right now, the pilot program in Worcester is a $47 million, they say, expenditure for the pilot program. If we can squash this in Worcester and it doesn't get out of the bounds of Worcester, it will not make it to us. This is from now, we have about till the middle of June, when a big report on the pilot program is due to the Department of Public Utilities. So we are working very hard between now and June, door to door in Worcester. We have to do our meetings in Worcester to get the people of Worcester to say, we're not doing this. Because all they know is what National Grid and the Commonwealth are telling them.
So you're asking us to come to this meeting and say...
Well, we're doing this meeting in Worcester, it'd be great.
Okay.
But the thing that, if you want to take action, is to call your local mayor and in your town and in the state, the Attorney General, call the governor, emails, calling, because they are afraid of us. They are afraid of knowledge. They want you to only know what they are telling you, and they're not telling you any of this.
Do you have one of the things that Medfield Green did,
Yeah.
which was about the Charles River,
Yeah.
and having higher policy to make sure that that's cleaned out near the Medfield State Hospital? Remember we all sent out letters?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have like an email draft or something that we could send and forward that's already articulate and gets all these points across rather than these
Sure.
things coming up?
Well, Penny Connor, who works for NSTAR, I believe, she had sent a message to Medfield Green saying that, they had no intentions about putting smart meters in this area, but, they're not on the houses right now in Medfield. It's the, what is it, the AMR is on.
What did you find out here?
They're the ones that will send
Right.
but it won't go both ways.
The AMRs are a stepping stone.
Right.
So with a keystroke and/or chip, your AMR will be smart.
Yeah, this one here is capable of being AMR fully. It's a brand new one. It's an AMR, it has the capability of being plugged in, but it's already transmitting RF. It's already sending it.
The ones that are on the houses.
Right, it's sending it out.
One on this building, he went out to
Yeah, the AMI has a
AMI
ability to
is
receive it as well.
Okay.
So it can receive a command, and it can actually, they can reduce the amount of current or power going to your house if they want to, if there's a brownout or whatever. But that's the two-way communication. But this one here is putting out RF already.
So can we call our electric company and say, if you're thinking about doing this, we don't want it on our house?
Yeah, and in fact, you may find out, because I did a quick audit in town, and I found both on commercial, and actually, there's also some water meters on some Honeywell water meters. They have some RF transmitters as well, and it's a little different frequency, but as you mentioned, but they are already doing that in town. So yeah, that's one way you can start. And the way that people have gotten results, and you have to be tenacious, is tell them, look, there's somebody in my family that's ill-affected, and that's the only thing they'll stand up. I need to talk to my doctor, come out and take it out. And a lot of times you have to be pretty adamant. But as far as preventing it from continuing to roll out and then getting the complete full smart meter, which is the two-way communication, because as Patricia mentioned, we at Hall Smart Meters, the organization, we put together a bill, and it's up in the House right now. But that bill is only to opt out, which is good, because you can opt out yourself at your house if we get that passed. The only issue with that is if your neighbor doesn't opt out, you're still in their field, and you get 3 or 4 of them
But
you can
it's a
see.
place to start. So the
Right.
first thing we should do is contact our representative that we're in favor of that opt-out bill.
Can I say something about the
Yeah.
opt-out?
Sure.
Opt-out is straw, opt-out is the Alamo. Opt-out does not, we have to stop it. The opt-out is literally 9 steps down the road after we have failed. It's great that the bill exists, but opting out does not matter if 3%, 9% of the population opts out, and 93, 96% have these meters, because eventually resistance will be futile, and we'll all have them.
It's like secondhand smoke, even though.
Right.
Right, you don't want these in your town.
have these meters already.
Right, you don't want these in your town.
No, you don't have one in Watertown.
Right,
I
yeah.
don't?
No, they're in, I know the towns, they're in Danvers, Marblehead, parts of Fitchburg, parts of Worcester, and Concord. And other towns have, so your analog meter, pardon?
We have
Right.
an AMR.
So the analog meter is kind of like the old 50s bicycle.
Right.
The AMR goes from, the moped all the way through to the gull-wing, Harley end. I mean, the AMR is a big range of what it can do and what it can do. And then the smart meter is the Lamborghini. And there's a big range in that AMR. And a lot of the AMRs then can be retrofitted with keystroke and or chip to become smart. So there's some stealth involved, because they're telling you that it's only AMR, but all they have to do.
So they
is
don't
this,
have
and
to
it'll be
tell you.
smart. Pardon?
They don't have to tell you. Like, you could have,
Oh, then no.
so how, does anyone have analog anymore?
I haven't.
Yeah, not, surprisingly, not much around here. Again, I looked at, in Medfield and Millis and Medway, and there's a lot of those have already been changed. And you might want to term it, because everyone's trying to, because there's different definitions of smart meters. You don't want an RF generator or receiver on your meter. You want the analog meter for your power, like you've had since you bought whatever house you bought. You want the analog meter, not an RF generator or an RF receiver. That's the key thing. You don't want radio frequency.
So what if I called and I said, I don't know if I have my house, so I'll check first. And I say, I want this, if it is the two that you mentioned, what if I say, I want you to switch it back to analog?
And that's a starting point, because you'll get into a dialogue. You may get a little bit of a runaround. We have a number of people on our committee that have gotten it changed, but you have to be, they have to be persistent.
Say that you have
Right,
effects in your house.
and you have to be persistent with regard to that. One of the easier, quick ways, without even looking to see, is that the old meters had dials, and you could see the dials. The new meters are LCDs, and so, but not all of them are, because again, some of the old meters, as both Patricia and Claire mentioned, they've had step, upgrades, if you will, before you get to that. But one of the things I noticed that they're doing quickly is they're not even bothering with some of the upgrades. They're just going in and not saying anything, pulling the old analog out, and as soon as you see an LCD, which you will, and you'll see those in town, they've already begun to update the infrastructure, and that's at least capable of RF generation, if not capable of two-way RF communication, where they send a signal and they control what's going on in your house, as well as them receiving how much electricity you're using at what hour you're using it, and so forth. So
If you look at the meter, it has an FCC number on it or an RR number on it. It's a radio transmitter.
Those numbers can be tiny.
And sometimes it's a sticker underneath, but they have to put that on it. And you'll notice also they are not underwriter laboratory tested, which is one of the other big.
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that goes back to those fires.
Yeah.
I mean, most of
They
the
were
things
never tested.
you don't want to bring components or things into your home, into your kitchen, that are not underwriter laboratory tested. These things are not even UL rated or
What,
tested.
on that basis, couldn't we refuse it?
Again, that's a good point. I mean, if you bring that up and the RF
That's an
generation,
insurance issue.
yeah,
What happens is,
good point.
That's a
the
safety
fire
issue.
happens, fires, surges, go ahead. And what happens is because they hire installers, the utility points at the installer points at the meter manufacturer points back at the utility, they stand there and point each other, and your house, is damaged by fire or electrical issues, and you're left holding the bag. Because they tell you that what's behind the meter is your responsibility, even though you have no way to access that. It's terrible.
Do they have to negotiate or consult owners of apartment complexes before they can go in and make these changes?
The only thing that they have to do there is if they're in an inside location, sometimes they're not always on the outside of the building, they just have to let them know that they need access. But they don't tell you at all. Because I don't know if you noticed, especially if you're in this area. I noticed in this part of the country, in this part of Massachusetts, once a month, you ever notice that the clocks are all reset, but they're not way off. They're unplugging or replugging in electronic components in the middle of the night, and sometimes you get your clocks flashing. There was not really a power outage. Well, that's what happens when they do the meters too. You'll get that. They'll come in, they'll disconnect it and unplug it. You won't necessarily notice it. They're doing it during the day when a lot of people aren't necessarily home. And of course, you might have thought it was your meter reader going in there. And that's the other thing that came into to light was that they're not having licensed electricians replace these. Now, these guys are technicians, but they don't even licensed electricians. So it's questionable as to how well they've put the new meters in. And that's another, they're looking for all these different causes because there's so many fires and there's so many issues. And there's fires not just at the point of the meter, further on down the house that they found it. It was the meter's problem where there was a short or the surge caused an issue. So you could have a fire in your house and not even know that it was the meter that caused it.
So the box, your fuse box, it's the circuit breaker box, is right on the opposite side of this meter.
Yeah, generally close, because you usually try to have your circuits on the inside of your house, right? On the inside of your house, it shouldn't be, too far away generally, but yeah, on the outside. Yeah, the meters, they're taking the old meters out, putting the new ones in, but the new ones have had a tremendous amount of issues. And again, there's no UL rating for it.
Why isn't there, I mean, if what you're saying is true, why isn't there an outcry? Why aren't there huge organizations, I mean,
Because we're
like
just
health
at the beginning.
organizations?
Yeah. If you watch some of the
Why is there a
videos.
big organization
Well,
that?
look at some of the videos, and I'd encourage you to just peruse the internet. Google smart meter fires, Google smart meter health issues, and take a look. You'll get enough to read for about a month. There is a lot out there, but it's been all different locations, again, in Asia, in Europe, in Canada, in the United States. So it's coming out, but it's all recent. There's not a lot of, the deployment's more recent now too. So this really is the time for it. So.
The biggest answer for that is big money.
Yeah.
Big money. There's a telecommunications board member on almost every newspaper and every media outlet. Big money is controlling what we know.
I wanted to just mention one other thing too, which I don't know if this is clear from the conversation yet about the smart meters, but one of the things they're trying to do is optimize the load, because we have electricity, and like if everyone went home and charged their car right after work, it would be a big drain, an electric car. So they thought like if people can charge their electric cars at night on a timer, it would be better for the grid. But what they're planning to do is retrofit all the appliances in your home. It's on your flyer there. So that the smart meter can say, okay, the refrigerator can go on now the heater can go on, now the air conditioner can go on. So there's another level of radiation that's going to go through your home and balance the load on your appliances. I mean, this thing goes on and on. These are the new appliances that have the chips in them. And they're, supposed to save energy, but it's a grand experiment. And, from an engineering standpoint, it's very eloquent, but they haven't looked at the effect on biological water, which is basically the radiation, the magnetic fields, and the whatnot. So there's a huge amount of money to be made down the road in every country, because we're all going to have to replace our appliances. I noticed my friend is here. Do you want to mention about your water heater? Twice she's had to replace her water heater. Appliances are corroding because radiation causes corrosion. So this is not a green technology. It's actually a massive sort of the next financial wave, just like when the cell phone towers kind of, went up and everybody bought phones. This is the next, like, have a smart house with all this stuff retrofitted. And a lot of people in the smart houses are getting sick. And a lot of times it's the wife. And people don't know. They've been diagnosed with breast cancer, they're on blood pressure medication. So, it's really, I don't like to use that word stealth, and I don't know where the line is in terms of, wanting to point blame, and that's not so important to me. What's important to me is that we have the science. We're just, in this country, we're disconnected because the consumer marketplace pushes the rules first, and then they, once they get that ability to put in, whether it's the low-income housing, whether it's, this now trying to put wind towers up all over the country and forcing them into communities, which is causing ecological disaster. So I think our science has to be keeping up with our policies, And I think if a community like Medfield just found you don't even have to worry about everybody else. This room could make a huge difference. In Maryland, it's 2 people that started the whole thing. And so, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay.
Actually,
but I know you did, Lesley. So, and I wanted to tell you, we had no idea we were going to be talking about this when I booked this talk last year, because the bill came up and everything came up all at once.
Well, I think it would be nice for you to address just for a minute. I think a lot of people have wireless computers and wireless phones and cell phones. And what are maybe some of the top things that you can think of that we can help to reduce our exposure?
I think Lesley was going to cover that. Were you?
Was?
Yes.
Well, I'll just bring some off the top of my head. Try and direct link your computer to your router, rather than have Wi-Fi in your house. We use Wi-Fi indiscriminately without being thoughtful that we are exposing ourselves, and it's very easy to connect the dots and to connect your computer to your router. Actually, if anybody doesn't have, I found I had 2 extra ones in my house, so if anybody wants, these are available.
Ethernet cables.
These are cables that connect your computer to your router.
Ethernet cables.
Yeah, I think that's what
You
they
still
call
have
it.
to turn the
It's
router
too
off, though.
inconvenient.
I mean, you still have to turn,
You want to
make the router not broadcast Wi-Fi, just not designate that it's not broadcast.
Sure.
And the other thing, if you have more computers and whatever, some people will not do that, but you can switch off your router at night. Patricia talked about our bodily rhythms, that's our healing time for our bodies. If we just switched our router off, it's very easy to do, switch off the Wi-Fi, you just go to your computer, you plug in whatever you need to plug in, you switch off your Wi-Fi, turn it back on in the morning, turn your cell phone off when you can. Don't carry it, near your adrenals or in places. I actually put it on the airplane mode because I had been taking my walk. After I sprained my ankle, I decided I really should have my cell phone with me when I walk in the woods. So if I need help, I could get help. And I was walking with my cell phone in my backpack, and I started thinking about it, and I ended up turning it on to the airplane mode so I could have access to it, but not as much. Anyway, I think we could also brainstorm around it, or maybe some other people, but those are things that I'm thinking of right now.
Question, is it possible to buy a printer that's not Wi-Fi? I'm going to buy one today. I was looking at them online, and it occurs to me.
You could do the direct link the same way.
Yeah, same way.
You just wouldn't use the Wi-Fi.
Okay, just simply don't
But you need to have them
connect that, okay.
beside each other.
I do.
And turn off, if there is a Wi-Fi, turn off on the computer.
What's happening in Europe is the technology is changing. So for example, with the baby monitors in Europe, it doesn't go on until a sound comes on. Whereas here in the United States, if you have a baby monitor, you're radiating the child all night. So again, we could accelerate, we could really take a quantum leap. I was just saying the baby monitors in Europe are voice activated. Here it's irradiating the baby all night long. So, we have the ability, and the customers have to provide, as the plant, they call it the pushback from the utilities. But, to begin to force these changes and to say, I'm not going to buy this until, but I would say do your due diligence, because I don't think the 3 of us here can convey everything about all of I'm not a person who says turn your cell phone off, because personally I'm concerned about the autism rate, and according to Dietrich Klinghardt, there are safe ranges that could have been used for these telecommunications networks, but it might be that we can't have the whole internet available, or the 4G network where you have to have 2 cell phones at the same time talking to your phone. We're in this thing where we keep going with more power, faster, more information, not realizing the infrastructure. And I think the biggest thing for me is that this has been promoted as a green, industry, and it's taking advantage of people's desire to want to be conservative. There is nothing about the earth in this model whatsoever. It's about consciousness. And
Where is the next meeting?
We're meeting in Dorchester on the 24th and in Worcester on the 22nd.
Are you from Boston, honey?
I decided on 28th. I wanted to say one more thing about devices in your home where you have baby monitors. Another big one is your cordless phone.
Yeah.
Not your cell phone, just the cordless phone. You don't want that near you when you're sleeping. That's a big
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, that was not really so much the case, but again, because as Patricia mentioned, everything is pushed up to higher power, higher frequency, more functionality. The new cordless phones are now in that range that's causing sufficient electromagnetic radiation to be a concern. You don't want to use your cell phone as an alarm clock. Shut it off at night. Don't keep it anywhere near you. And if you want to receive a call or something like that, put it on silence and put it in your kitchen or something. And don't keep it in your pockets of any sort when you're walking. If you're driving, put it in your cup holder. If you have to have it near you, don't put it in your lap or your pocket. Just little things like that. You move the field at least a little further away. And again, hardwiring your printer, hardwiring your internet. Because they're finding out a lot of studies with laptops, people literally having it on their laptops. And those particular cases, and the cell phones, by the way, those are affecting males more so. There's a lot of different effects there that are directly correlated in a lot of the studies, both domestically and abroad. And there's no
fertility.
Yeah, and also again, they know that radiation is a carcinogen. We know that from within these bandwidths. So just some of those common things that you can do, and minimizing. We've so quickly rolled out the wireless lifestyle that we've all adopted it very quickly, so it's difficult to take a half a step back, but for your own health's sake, there's definitely things you can do, and those are some of the things I think we mentioned, from the baby monitors to the printers.
And the Bluetooth things that people wear.
Bluetooth for that, and I'd recommend that, because in Europe, for example, they already know from their studies, it's illegal in some countries for children under a certain age, 10 or 7, to have a cell phone to use it. I mean, we've done that where children can't be on phones unless they're adults on driving, and adults and children can't text. That's been for driving safety, not for the electromagnetic radiation. They have it for electromagnetic radiation because they know the undeveloped child and the undeveloped child's skull has less protection from that, so they can't even legally use those things. So you can adopt some of the precautionary measures that they have, because they tend to be a little bit, they're less afraid to take steps and implement them in terms of the safety of the current and future generations, and so they've adopted those and made those law. Those are good guidelines. You could probably look at some of the, I would go with European guidelines for cell phone use, and it will give you both, and they separate that out from children to adults, because the studies have shown the children are more susceptible. And again, going with a Bluetooth for yourself, where you don't constantly have the transmitter receiver up against your ear. If you got Bluetooth, and keep that separate away, and don't necessarily put it in your pocket. If you can put it over the side, you put it on the table. They have different lengths of connectivity. I'd recommend that, because that's something we've gotten into a habit of, and it's such a cumulative use. And we won't have this, as we said, the studies are going to be in 2020 for children, and 2015 will begin to get things out, even though there are already studies out conclusive. You're being the experiment right now. So
where's the best, adult males or young adult males carry their phone in their pockets? They don't have purses. Some guys have nails, whatever they're called, but they don't. They're right in their pockets.
Yeah, that's...
Where's the best place in the body for it to be?
Yeah, it sounds like there's no place.
Maybe in your shoe. Maybe like Maxwell Smart, put it right on top of your shoe probably would be the best place. But, well, further away from the head and further away from the organs, from as you can see from the, graphic demonstration of Patricia was showing you with the meridians and everything, really furthest extremity. Probably, carrying it in your hand, something like that. But again, it begins to be less convenient for people, and it's something that they're concerned with. If you have it shut off, or if you have it in non-transmittal mode or receiver mode, that's a different story. Get to where you're going to get and make your call.
I would say back pocket is better than front pocket.
Yeah, I would.
Maybe we can learn to go back and wait to make a phone call.
What was?
I have a rotary phone still.
And actually,
power failures, I use that.
Believe it or not, one of the good things about the youth is that texting is better. Believe it or not, texting sending and receiving texting rather than having that transmitter up against your ear and going and receiving. Plus, it also tends to cut the communication short, cut to the chase, unless you got, my thumb's not as fast as this generation, but, so that, believe it or not, that's sort of been one plus with the younger folks, and encourage them to text and talk less,
But the radiation is still there.
Yeah, but they're not, it's not as prevalent because it's out here. I mean, against your ear and your brain here. Well, when you're texting, you're out here, you're not up against your ear, talking so we're talking about a communication with the phone itself.
Yeah, but in order to know you got a text, you get a ping.
Yeah.
Because that's on you or it's
The storage of the phone is the same thing. If you're not tending to be in a communicative mode, if you could shut it off until you get to where you get to. But other than that, it's the furthest away from the body is the best thing that you can do. An outside pocket of a jacket rather than an inside pocket is.
One professor complained in a column, like, kids are losing the ability to speak English and write well when they get to college. They don't know grammar, they don't know how to write a simple sentence.
I think you're right. It was I think it was Einstein who said when the machines begin to take over, that's when we run into an issue where we're not communicating human to human, and that's along the lines of what you just commented on.
Maybe that's the intent.
So do you have a question, Tim?
Bluetooth versus like having headphones, with a little microphone.
I would tell people about
The
that.
wired is better than Bluetooth.
The headset that you just mentioned is a good way to go. The other thing to take a look at, and it's usually the fine print, is it will tell you, but you always have to look in the back of what radio frequency it's transmitting. So you can kind of look at, you may be able to look at that online as well.
I'd like to thank you both.
Yes,
Thank everyone. And if you would hang around so that people can, because some people need to leave. We have snacks in there, we have hot water for tea. Feel free to hang around
These have
and ask
shielding
questions.
and
That was one way over.
I figured we
No,
would.
it's important. It's been very important. Thank you.
I'm Roberta Lynch, and you're watching Medfield.tv.
Access to our community.